A couple months ago, I made a video titled, Dr. Doom Did Nothing Wrong. You see, it's not clickbait, I put quotation marks. And while the reception of the video was generally well received besides Victor himself, I had one comment show up more often than others, requesting I do the same for Magneto. While this seems like a slam dunk easy video to make, I feel that there are so many videos centered on Magneto already that cover his morality as a character, and the way Marvel has softened his edges over the years has made him generally turn to the side of the X-Men and even renouncing his old philosophy. Obviously, yeah, no duh, he was a bad guy, while nowadays, everyone has their mean streak. In short, I kind of feel like the conversation feels mundane. And a lot of the time, both sides of the argument tend to only talk about one era and forget the decades worth of development that Eric had to go through, making him one of the most complex characters in Marvel. And the whole phrase Magneto was right kinda annoys me a little when it's even brought up, because the origins of that phrase are from Quentin Quire, whose second mutation is being the biggest contrarian in any room he pops up in. While Magneto has been used as an example of redemption and change, I would argue his foil, Charles Xavier, has been written in almost the opposite. A descent over the decades, from a stand-up leader of the X-Men willing to compromise into someone more sinister. Someone who is willing to do the extreme as long as the ends justify the means. Some would say, he's a jerk. But how did this happen? Charles Xavier is next to a saint for the X-Men. Oh, okay, maybe the second closest thing to a saint. A mild-mannered man who took in many a mutant and raised them to be exemplary members of society. For the most part. How can he fall so far from grace that we're even having this conversation in the first place? Well, the thing is, Xavier has always been kind of a dickhead since the start. Take during the 60s where he would constantly mind-wipe fellow heroes, and while some would say the whole child soldier thing is a pretty sore spot, I kinda want to push back on that notion. Though I've made this joke in the past, but here's the thing about that. Is it even that crazy? Yes, I know I'm arguing for child soldiers, but look. Spider-Man was around the same age and he took up the responsibility of being a hero. Hell, Bucky was at the ripe age of 16 and we kicked him directly into the middle of World War II. So I really think the whole argument doesn't really work when he's willing to let them leave when they have a change of heart. It was also a way to integrate mutants into society, presenting them in a more palatable form to the public sensibilities. But as well, we see a lot in their origins. These kids are being chased by hateful mobs, disconnected and rejected by society. If it wasn't for Charles, they would be lost or even worse. Hate groups don't care if the mutants are children, as they don't see them as human in the first place. Charles didn't enroll the original 5 into the War of Mutant Liberation. They were already a part of it from their very birth. Xavier merely trained them for that fight. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna let good old Chuck here off that easy. There's still a ton of downright things he's done. Take during the 70s where Xavier once again raises another team, the New Mutants, then shortly after dumps him on his ex Magneto, going into space. Now, obviously it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I always like Doug's recounting of these events. Oh, don't worry, Douglas, my boy. Everything will work out just like that time you died while I was in space having sex with a bird lady. God, how I miss you, Krakoa Cypher. And need I remind you, that sexy bird lady is also part of the Shi'ar Empire, known for conquering any planet they could get their talons on. To be honest, for a guy who takes in teens by the hour, he has a bad track record with them. Think about the time during Dark Genesis where we learned that he sent out a team of New Mutants to rescue the original 5 who were trapped on Krakoa, which proceeded to die horrifically shortly after landing. Not to mention, one of them was Gabriel Summers, who was Scott's brother, that Charles just so happened to mind-wipe him about after his death. Not great so far, but hey, what about his own flesh and blood? We can't forget him. Xavier certainly did. David Haller, born after Charles developed feelings for one of his patients, Gabrielle Haller, who similarly admired him, but after leaving him kept David's birth a secret. To put it bluntly, David was mentally unwell, and while Xavier did try his best to help him and loved him dearly, he loved him in only a way Charles could, by putting a psychic kill switch in his brain just in case he ever got a little out of hand. But the thing is with Charles Xavier is that most points I bring up against him is that there's always a caveat. Because Professor X isn't this evil imposing figure that switches sides. No, he's a deeply flawed individual that took up the responsibility of being the leader of an entire group at his own expense. He's always had this savior complex, taking in many children who are in need of help and guidance. For all the help he's done for others, he often neglects himself. He's not this grand savior with a larger-than-life dream, but a human that is deeply flawed. That's kind of the problem with how so many writers want to paint Xavier as this morally great character with these constant reveals over the decades, as after a certain point, more of these instances of Xavier being morally compromised start to merge into one giant snowball effect. It's not one big heel turn that makes him irredeemable, it's these smaller moments that build up into one big blob of super dickery in a way. As well, I think people tend to have this wrong notion on his character that was kind of set up with the animated series and the movies, where he's this wise mentor figure that is there to guide the X-Men without any faults, which kind of takes away a key element of the X-Men in questioning the status quo and authority. Charles Xavier isn't this infallible figure that always knows what's right. He's still part of the flawed establishment, even if he's on the side of the X-Men. So you get this weird disconnect if you only know him from these adaptations, and you pick up a book and quickly learn that
he's an asshole.
Even from an early age, Xavier was a stereotypical golden child. He was a varsity athlete, an honors student, but most of all, empathetic. He was aware that he had an advantage with his mutation. For some, people would say that Charles had a gift. He would use his abilities to help the people around him that he cared for. His widowed mother gave his abusive brother grace for his upbringing. He was understanding at the bare minimum, but aside from his compassion, he also had a great sense of morality and judge of character. From the first glance of his stepfather, he knew something was sinister with him, and he was exactly right. These two strong characteristics would collide after his time in the military, and he would meet the mutant known as the Shadow King, who would use his gift in a different manner from Xavier, using it for his own gain, not caring for the world around him. He was by all means evil to Charles Xavier. This emboldened Charles in taking up the idea of the mutant dream, that mutants and humans should coexist peacefully, that he alone must take up this ordeal, as he believed only he can lead the next generation of mutants into the right direction. While a selfless act, maybe even a noble one on paper, as many of the mutants around him, such as Magneto, are more pessimistic about coexistence, but it begins to become more questionable the deeper you look into it. For a leader, to bring in so many people from many backgrounds, not just from around the world, but also through time and space, he should take in as many perspectives as possible. But that's exactly his flaw. Charles Xavier is defined by many characteristics, but the one thing everyone will agree on is that at the end of the day, he's an optimist almost to a fault. That after everything he's been through, he believes that mutant coexistence can one day be achieved and mutants are exemplary figures to humans no matter how bad it gets. But what Xavier fails to understand is that his upbringing is what led him to come to that conclusion. Magneto was but a child during World War II, where he personally saw the horrors of being Jewish in 1940s Germany. He saw another group of marginalized people face dehumanization, villainized, and subjugated to near annihilation, mirroring the trauma he once went through, leading him to come to the conclusion that mutants have to rule over humans through force and fear, that coexistence can't exist, because of his own life experiences, causing him to believe that people will always fear the other, as is in human nature, that coexistence is near impossible, so rather, to show mutants are superior, humans will be too afraid to act against them. Now, before I come off as I'm saying Magneto was right, I need to reiterate. Magneto was wrong about a lot of stuff. Maybe not everything. I mean, humans are really good at killing mutants. This isn't a defense of his actions, but rather an explanation. The tragic failing of Magneto is that he perpetuates the same violence he saw, but understandable how he came to that conclusion because it lies in his perspective. But Xavier fails to realize his ordeal. Due to his background, he was always in a position of power due to his privilege. He grew up exorbitantly rich, he had an Ivy League education, he simply put had more than what the average mutant could ever dream of having. He had the wealth to build the institutions and go across the world to bring in these mutants together. He already had the status to become leader. Even besides that fact, he had a mutation that was easily masked. He had the opportunity to blend into the general public as his gift was merely telepathic. Morlocks have to dwell in sewers. Nightcrawler has deep blue skin that make him look like a devil to many. Rogue literally cannot touch the rest of the world for the majority of her life. Mutants are commonly chased and hunted for who they are. Even children face this ordeal, something that Charles only faced when he took up the position as a leader. His perspective is a massive blind spot for him because he doesn't know what's it like to live with a mutation that he cannot mask. He doesn't realize that some mutants can't always integrate into society, that to fundamentally change one's own appearance to appease the sensibility of the general public rather than changing those sensibilities is a betrayal of his own teachings, that these gifts are something that should be cherished. Now, while Magneto's dream may seem more desirable if you were a mutant, that if you were already feared, why not give them a reason to fear you? In the long term, Charles Xavier's plan seems the best course of action. That maybe tomorrow, through one's own good deeds, will sow the seeds for a true understanding between mutants and everyone else. That is exactly why he's so dismissive of everyone else's perspective. He believes he's always the right man in the room, and when that's often the case, it leads to him being rash, because he truly believes that if mutants stray away from his path, it would lead to devastation. But to guarantee that he must build authority to the X-Men leads to him developing the savior complex. But in the guise of building up this appearance meant that he had to be flawless, be this wise sage that knew all of the answers, because he can't afford to lose that reputation with the X-Men. But to be human is to have flaws, and to repress his own flaws also meant repressing his wants, needs, and desires, because these are, in his eyes, selfish, and the Professor X he presents himself as is the selfless bastion of hope. Ironically, the man who can open up everyone around him closes himself off from the rest of the world, fearful what his students may see him as. Not to say that he didn't have a relationship with his students, no, he still deeply cared for them. Look at Jean, one of the few people he can truly relate to, both being telepaths. In X-Men Origins, Jean, he's able to show her that her telepathy can be used to see the world in vibrant colors akin to dreams instead of the gloomy palette that she believed the world was. He was basically a father to the main five. I mean, look, Cyclops didn't learn how to shut himself off emotionally from anyone else. That, my friend, is learned behavior. Xavier is a good man, but just like everyone else, he's a messy, selfish individual, and that's okay. It just clashes with the image he built over the decades, presenting himself as seemingly saintly to help usher in a new mutant golden age. That's why I think I love it so much when he does indulge in himself. Like, fuck them kids, go make love to your bird lady wife. You earned it, king. I think a highlight of one of these instances is in X-Men 297, where Jubilee runs into Xavier, brooding at night, having temporarily gained the ability to walk again, but the effects will only last for a few more hours as the techno-organic virus burns out. He's glad to feel the grass beneath his feet once more, but is still melancholy, saying that if he had the choice, he would give up everything, including his mutant gift, for the dream to walk once more. Before leaving to contemplate more, Jubilee actually reels him back in and says, "You haven't fully lived until you bladed." And they genuinely have a great time together, even getting him out of his comfort zone so much he tells her that if he dies, there's a copy of his will somewhere in his office. After the night ends and the sun rises, Jubilee tells him there was this weird disconnect that is always train in wrangling up mutants, but tonight there was a connection, and that he is somewhat of a normal guy despite it all. The issue ends with Charles solemnly saying, "It's been a while since I've been accused of being normal." Why this issue works so well for me is that Xavier is brought down from the pedestal that he sees himself as. He's uncomfortable by having control removed from him, but finds joy in the freedom that it gives him. It's tragic that he feels that he needs to present himself in such a way that he denies himself this feeling. But at a certain point, you can only deny yourself from your subconscious for so long. At some point, something has to give. One day, after all of those tragedies he had to face as the leader of the X-Men, the embodiment of all of that, Onslaught, no doubtedly would be an inevitability. For someone who spouts idealism of equality, he does not see himself within that. As for Charles, he's doomed to take on the weight of the pain of every single mutant, only letting a single few peer into his true self. So when people ask why I'm so interested in talking about Charles Xavier rather than Magneto, it's because Xavier is where the real contradiction lies. Charles is a man who built an entire ideology around openness and coexistence while quietly locking away the parts of himself that didn't fit the dream. Xavier isn't evil, and he isn't a saint either. He's a deeply flawed human, crushed under the weight of being the right man for mutant kind all the time. His tragedy isn't that he failed the dream, but that he believed he had to become the dream at the cost of his own humanity. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable thing about Charles Xavier. Not that he was wrong to hope, but that in refusing to confront his own shadow, ensured it would one day confront everyone else. Hey guys, happy holidays, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. I just want to say thank you And if you liked the video, you already know what to do, I hope.